going to talk about Passive House, and the first thing I have to say is I don't consider it a green building rating system. So I don't know if I belong here, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So what is Passive House? Not a green building rating system. It's a performance standard, and it's also a design and construction methodology. And I emphasize this first point about the green building rating system because when I started, I did a lot of consulting with other architects, helping them take their design and kind of make it Passive House. And that approach is kind of like, oh, I'm going to add these things to this design, and that is a really difficult and risky path. The real key to success with Passive House, in my experience, is that it starts in the design, and the principles and ideas of this inform the design from the get-go. And so when you hear that Passive House is really expensive or really hard to do, in my opinion, that starts because it hasn't been designed to be successful as Passive House. Anyhow, it relies at its core, it's a high-performance building shell that's very carefully balanced with its environment. And this building shell is thereby inherently comfortable, and it requires minimal active heating and cooling, which is where this term Passive House comes from. So it basically largely stays comfortable on its own. And another key point to this, the efficiency of Passive House is derived from the inherent comfort of the building. The standard includes overall energy use, but it is not a low energy building that happens to be comfortable. It's a comfortable, healthy, quiet building that is therefore energy efficient. Another kind of important philosophical difference, and it explains a lot of what otherwise might seem strange about how the rating is put together. So the keys to this: an optimized thermal envelope, air tightness and ventilation, balanced solar gains, efficient equipment and appliances, and in many cases renewable energy as well. But the renewable energy is included in that, but you have to kind of reach a certain performance threshold without that. So it's not a net zero kind of proposition. The metrics of Passive House, and again, there's no quiz, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but it's basically annual heating demand, annual cooling demand, peak heating demand, peak cooling demand, a measure of overheating, what percentage of the hours of the year the building would be above 77 degrees if it had no air conditioning. Air tightness measurement, and I'm just pointing out, there are two organizations that certify Passive House, so they have a few differences there. Primary energy or source energy. So it calculates site energy, but it's not really interested in site energy. It's looking at the environmental impact of the energy use that building has. And there's also something called primary energy renewable, which is putting the building in the context of a 100% renewable energy grid and getting a sense of what kind of burden it would place on that renewable grid. And then there's also source energy with the Passive House Institute US. Those metrics look at shell performance and comfort, and these are about environmental impact. And so, as I mentioned, there are two organizations. One wasn't enough, so we have to have two that compete with each other. The Passive House Institute in Germany was the organization that formalized this originally, and then there's FIAS, which is Passive House Institute US. And they each have their own standards, which vary. Fundamentally, they have the same kind of approaches, but in the weeds, there are differences. And so the certification process, that skipped for some reason. So first, an energy model is created, and that's done by a consultant or designer. There's training for these things, and people can be certified to do this, but you don't have to be. I think it would be very hard to do it without the training. But someone creates an energy model of the building. Kind of like, in a way, Passive House is like a very rigorous version of Title 24, more than a rating system, if you will. So there's an energy model created, and then the accuracy of that energy model, if you're going to certify it, is verified by a certifier, and that's based on the design drawings of the building. They look at the building, the drawings that you've provided, and look at your energy model and say, yes, you got this correct, or you missed this, or I need more information about, how are you connecting? There's pieces of the construction drawings are missing, we need more detail, etc. Then after the energy model has been verified as accurate, that's called pre-certification. And in general, if you want to certify a project, you're well advised to have it pre-certified before you start building it. Then there's checking that the construction of the building conforms to the energy model, which means it conforms to the drawing, so making sure that the builder has built it according to what the plans show. That's the rater or verifier. And then finally, when all that's done, upon construction completion, you can have it certified, you get a plaque, you get entered in a database. Or there's a prescriptive path. And that I don't know that much about that, but that is more like a checklist. So I stand half corrected, or I'll say a third corrected. Levels of certification. So Passive House Institute in Europe has 3: Classic, Plus, and Premium, and these basically have to do with how efficient the building shell is, and then how much renewable energy has been added. And they're separate metrics. They don't add them together, but they require both of those. They also have EnerFit for retrofits, and they have low energy buildings for buildings that kind of did a good job, but not good enough to make the certification. And then apparently there's a new thing called EZPH, which is sort of a prescriptive path. Passive House Institute US is integrated with the Department of Energy system, so it's going from Energy Star through the Zero Energy Ready Home, and then there's FIAS Core and FIAS Zero, and those are basically the 2 certification levels with FIAS. They also have a prescriptive path, and they have Revive for retrofits. So that's the smorgasbord there. FIAS also has bundled certification, so there are some checklists involved here. So if you have a FIAS project that's certified, you also get DOE Zero Energy Ready Home certified, which means, and you also have to get that, you get EPA Indoor Air Plus, EPA Energy Star, and a HERS rating and score. And so those things and all those rating systems are bundled in with FIAS certification. And that's it. Thank you.